excited to join up again with our Vice President of Customer Success, Kristi Faltorusso, who is one of the best and the most generous and thought leaders out there and mentors. Kristi, how you doing today?
Hey, Dave, great to be back. I can't believe that we're in week 6 of this series.
I know, it's crazy. Do you have a good weekend? You went to a concert, right?
I did. It was my first concert back since 2019. So it's my first one since the pandemic. And we went to go see Zac Brown Band, which for any of you country fans out there, it was phenomenal. It was, I almost forgot how much I miss concerts, but it was outside, beautiful venue on the water. And it was just so lit up and everyone was just so excited to be out there.
All right. Well, cool. Any country fans? That's my first question on chat. If you're a country fan, then let us know. And we'll add some country into these into the preview or the music, the walk-up music, what I call for these webinars. Well, that's great. So Kristi, tell us what we're going to do today.
All right. So we're going to ditch the slides for today. So awesome. Here we are. This is what's going to happen. Now, I apologize that we kind of sprung this on everybody last minute. So we probably didn't draw as many folks this week as we had in previous weeks, but that's okay. For those of you who are joining us, you got to get like your own exclusive conversation with us. What happened is we had so many people attend the past 5 sessions who had a ton of questions about how do we implement things or just questions that were unique to their organization. And what I thought would be really valuable is actually to not ignore the questions, but actually take time to allocate, a full hour where we would just answer them live. So any questions that you have regarding any of the content that we presented over the past 5 weeks, whether it was about designing your journey, the partnership kickoff, the renewals management and forecasting, interviewing, we covered so much. So we're just opening it up and Dave and I are literally just going to answer your questions. And so we want to just make this live and interactive. It's a safe place. There are no dumb questions. Really, we just want to make sure that we're helping feed you and give you any insight and guidance that we can to help you accelerate your programs and continue to make that change. So I am seeing some country fans over here, so I'm very excited about that. That's right. But that's how we're going to use our time today, Dave. So really interactive and engaging. And like I said, we're gonna get through as much as we can.
Okay, so there's 3 ways you can ask your question. You can raise your hand virtually, use the hand raise at the bottom of Zoom, and we'll call on you. Those who raise their hand, we'll actually try to put you on video, on voice and video. I'm not sure we can do video. I'm not seeing the option to do video, but we'll do voice. And then also you can drop them in chat. So if you want to, excuse me, in the Q&A, either one, we'll take them. However you want to send in your questions, just go ahead and do it. We've got one already. We've already got one. We'll have Philip. Philip, we're going to allow you to talk. So here we go. Let's jump in. Can you hear us there?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. Thanks, Philip. You're the lucky first one, the brave one to get us going.
All right. Good for me, sort of. Thanks for running this, both of you. I had a question around forecasting. I had seen the stages you've got and the forecast probability that you've got. And I was wondering how you looked at things sort of forecasting at the beginning of a quarter, right? So, when I think about it at the beginning of the quarter, right, you've got a set of customers who are due to renew this quarter, right? And at the beginning of the quarter, right, there's probably a number of customers where you haven't reached out to them just yet, right? You're either in the initial research, initial outreach or consideration, overcoming objections, right? Do you tend to forecast them at a relatively high percentage to start the quarter, or do you forecast them at a relatively low percentage to start the quarter?
So that's a great question, Philip. So the way that we do this is, one, we do run our renewal process 120 days out, which that gives us a little bit more room. So going into any quarter, hopefully we've already started enough conversations there to get a good pulse on how our customers are feeling about their intention to continue the partnership. But the way that we enter all of the renewal opportunities into our forecast is they all come in at 30%, which enters them into the pipeline. And then from there, what we do is we layer on our customer pulse to help us understand their sentiment and the likelihood and probability of their retention. So client success is very unique. I've used a ton of different customer success softwares in my lifetime, but we have this functionality called our Pulse, the customer Pulse, and it enables you to score your customers throughout your engagement and partnership and really help understand if they're, on a satisfied scale or dissatisfied scale, and allow you to add context there with what we call either risk or success factors. Now, based on the scoring there, which is done manually, so it's not based off of their maybe health score that you might have automatically designed, we use this to help indicate the overall health and sentiment of the partnership, which will help us lead in to say, okay, of that 30%, how much should we be forecasting up? And of that, how much should we be forecasting down for anything that we haven't started those initial conversations with? So that will help us really get a high level overview of what we might be anticipating for the quarter. We do have like one category, for example, called severe risk. And severe risk will actually indicate that a customer has already expressed their intention to not renew, right? Where we've got other customers who are extremely satisfied, where we just know that they're huge advocates, they're partners for life, right? They're going to continue. So that element of our technology allows us to overlay on the forecasting, which gives us some direction there. But again, nothing's in stone, right? So until you get that signed contract across the finish line, nothing's a done deal, but it does help us with the forecasting.
Okay. Yeah, because in my experience, I've tended to, at the beginning of the quarter, right, the prognosis for most customers is good, right? Most customers are going to renew, for whatever the sort of standard, just making up numbers for a moment, right? If you typically at a 90% retention rate, right, then like probably you should be at 90% at the beginning of the quarter, right? If you started 120 days out, like you said, but some customers you haven't really contacted them yet, and you're at 30% or 40%, then when you raise that number up to leadership, it's like, well, wait a second, what do you mean we're only going to be at 30 or 40% retention this quarter? Interesting. So at the beginning of the quarter, I mean, and I'll try not to take up any more of the time, but at the beginning of the quarter, without necessarily giving hard numbers or anything like that, I mean, are you forecasting, relatively high consistent to what your quarterly retention rate is, or are you forecasting relatively low and it only goes up during the quarter?
I tend to be slightly more conservative, Philip. I don't want to overinflate our forecast. I think it's a lot easier of a story to say, hey, things got better than, hey, things got worse. Dave is my boss, right? I'm sure he would appreciate me being a little bit more conservative and honest than to say, hey, everything's coming in looking good. And then, a week before the quarter closes, it's like, oh my gosh, all these accounts are churning. So like I said, we do try to be slightly more conservative, but Pulse and our success score does allow us to see that. So if you have a scoring mechanism, right, which would show your customers are adopting the platform effectively, they're engaging with you, their sentiment has been generally favorable, right? You should have other points of information that would allow you to lean in and say, you know what, for all intents and purposes, this is a healthy customer, and our healthy customers have a higher propensity for retention. So I think having those other mechanisms dialed in actually help you with the forecasting. So that way, when you don't have those conversations already underway, you can at least say, listen, they check the box here. They're using the platform. We've got strong engagement. Their last NPS was a 9 or 10. Our CEO spoke with their executive sponsor, 2 weeks ago, and things seemed well. So I think, as long as you have a strong health score, or another thing, like I said, our Pulse is my favorite. So I use our Pulse very heavily, but those two things on top of what your team is forecasting, I think should help directionally get ahead of those numbers. And then you can determine how much you want to weight that, right, Philip? So if I have them come in at 30% into the pipeline, I might say 30% into the pipeline, but because their Pulse is, green and their health score is green, I'm actually going to forecast this as what we would say kind of our best case and put it at 75%. I definitely wouldn't put anything over our 75% that we haven't already had those conversations with, but at least that would help me understand that there's a higher likelihood of this customer coming in.
Right. Okay.
I might add
let Dave jump in.
I'll add just a little bit too as well. Philip, great question. We're huge fans of forecasting renewals. I'll give you an example. This morning, I've been working on my investor update that I do at the end of every month, and I'm able to forecast and give them guidance out for the rest of the year. And it was great doing my update today and being able to say, hey, the forecast that I suggested last month was really accurate. And so as Kristi said, we like to be what I would say conservatively accurate as possible in our forecasting, and use that capability to really inform the business on where we're going, so there's no surprises. And over the quarter or over the month, it should narrow in to be very much more accurate over time, of course.
Right. Yep. Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Philip. Appreciate the
Thanks.
question. And we've got Kara now. Let's see, Kara. Hopefully I said your name right.
Yes, you did.
Right.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
So I have two questions. Consumption-based renewals. Have you had to deal with them? Do you have any recommendations on how to trigger off on consumption-based where you're no longer really tied to an annualized contract? Like you're renewing based on when they're done using their chips, so to speak.
That's a good question, Kara. I have not had specific experience with that. Most of the organizations that I've personally worked at have been SaaS-based, annual subscription models. I will say the only thing that may have come close, and then I'll lean in here and you tell me, and I might want to just unpack, learn a little bit more about your business so we can accurately lean in. But I did work at a company where we did sell seats based on their total employee count. And so they had a subscription model, but then there was huge volatility because it was tied to their email addresses. So if there was layoffs, we worked in education. So when schools were open versus schools closed, when students were in session, not, there was just a lot of movement there. And so we had to just keep very close count on that. And we worked through it on a regular basis, and we trued up everybody on it was either monthly or quarterly, depending on where we were falling with our numbers, quite frankly. But I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what is your consumption model that you're trying to solve for?
So, we're in the process of a cloud. Well, right now we're going cloud first and eventually a cloud only switch. So we're switching from on-prem, which is your standard annual contract or multi-year contract, definitive dates, to consumption-based, think Snowflake, not Snowflake, but think Snowflake, where the customer buys credits and then they have a period of time, we try to size it so that it's kind of an annual, but they could use it in 8 months or they could use it in 14 months. And so I'm just trying to get ahead of the curve here on how do I make that switch. Plus I now have two sets of, I have on-prem customers standard, and then I'm going to have a handful of consumption based and more as time goes by.
I might have one suggestion, Kara, and maybe you're doing this. It might be a heavy load to do it, but we have a concept that we've used here at ClientSuccess, and I've used in the past called PACE. And so on this consumption, I wonder if you're tracking PACE, which is if you have somebody who is committed to a certain amount of consumption over a period of the year, you divide that by 12 or whatever the period is, and you identify roughly how much you think they should consume each month, and then track the pace to that. And so you can start to see, are they ahead of pace? And if so, you can start having those conversations 2 or 3 months out, or are they behind pace? And if so, you can also have those discussions to try to figure out how to drive more consumption. Because I would assume you want the consumption, actually you want them to be ahead of pace because you want them to use more of your product. Have you ever looked at something like that?
That would be like 11 months. Use your stuff up in 11 months, early renewal.
Right. Yes. So that might be one way to get ahead of it and just have that kind of level of visibility to understand how they're tracking to a normal pace.
Okay. Thank you. The second part is, again, dealing with things that are not normal. And this is more of a just what's your thought process around reporting on early renewals. So if a annual contract is pulled forward into a different quarter. Like, I don't care if it renews in November and it should have renewed in December, but if it's renewing in September and it was supposed to renew in December, it starts like you started off at the beginning of the year or beginning of the quarter with a certain number and accounts that were set for renewal. And now all of a sudden the sales team is throwing monkey wrenches into your numbers, because now all of a sudden you now have additional accounts that, wait, where did, my boss is like, where did these come from? I'm like, yeah, go talk to the CRO. How do you handle that? How do you handle early renewals from a reporting standpoint? Do you kick them out, or do you embrace them and say, ooh, look, we have more business to close this?
I'm sure Dave is going to have a strong opinion on this. I'm going to give you mine quickly, Kara. So there is a difference between an early renewal and a pull forward, right? An early renewal is a customer who's committing to their renewal within their same subscription timeline, right? And that's better for the business. You're not contracting the actual subscription term length either. A pull forward, right, is effectively the customer changing their subscription dates and adjusting it and pulling it forward so that they are renewing in a new month or a new quarter effectively. I'm not a fan of pull forwards personally. I think that it's disruptive to bookings and isn't telling an accurate story. And I think that you're losing value on the contracts themselves because you're contracting the possible term length if you're pulling them forward and keeping it without extending that timeline. So if you pull forward a 12-month subscription, right, and you're kind of cutting off some of that timeline, unless you're saying, okay, if you're renewing 2 months early, we're actually going to make this a 14-month instead of a 12-month, right? So you're recouping that on the back end. But either way, it gets really messy. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure Dave's going to lean in with like a how-to, but I'm just going to give you my opinion. I don't think it's good business practice. I would stick to an early renewal where it's, you've got to commit, you book it, but it's out. And then you just measure that as part of your committed ARR.
I'm with you, but unfortunately I don't make the call on these. And so, yes, and you're right. The distinction, I should have said, basically doing rip and replaces.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I'll just add my 2 cents. Huge fan of early renewals. I think that's there's a strategic play there that I think a lot of customer success teams could leverage. And so I'm a big fan of early renewals. The rip and replace, unless there's a benefit to the business or the customer, I don't see the value. If it's something that it's sales reps are doing maybe for their comp plans or other things, I ultimately believe, lean towards to doing things that are good for the customer first, and then maybe for the overall business. And if you don't have any legitimate reason in that regard, then I would say it's not worth it. Stick with the original plan and renew them in their normal renewal period.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate
it. All right,
it.
Kara, thanks for the question.
Kara.
We're going to turn to the Q&A chat. So Kristi, here's the question from Anonymous. My leadership has not bought into creating customer journey because they don't believe there's one map journey that will fit every customer. We experience challenges training our CS team to understand what we need to guide customers through to lead them to success. And there are many gaps across the CS team. How can we support customers and the CS team with this amount of flexibility needed in a journey? So challenges in creating one journey across so many different customer types. And as a result, without any journey, it seems like that they're saying that the process is not as effective or efficient as it may be. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I would definitely, well, one, boo, I'm sorry that your leadership team hasn't realized and recognized the value on that. But I will say, you can design a journey that is extremely flexible. And I think even one more so that's even more flexible than the one I've designed here that we talked about as part of our week 1 session. You can create something that will include certain, I think, engagement points or milestones that are effectively going to satisfy 80% of your customer base, if you can do that, right? You can keep it high level enough, but where you're going to account for those things that you're requiring your team or you need your team to go and execute. So I don't think you need to be overly prescriptive. I think you can create something that will make your customers feel like they've got a clear understanding of how they're going to engage with you, but also give your team visibility onto what they have to achieve with those customers and at what points in that journey. So I would say, like, you don't need to create something super complex. I think that there's a way to do it where it can satisfy the majority of your customers, where you can keep it high level enough. You don't have to over engineer it. But I do think the lack of process does create chaos. And if your team does need to be doing certain things, you need to kind of guide them and put those processes in place. So I would just say, challenge them, explain to them the value that they would get from having something, and then design something high level enough where they feel like it will be flexible to satisfy the needs of your customers. And again, you might have a very complex product that requires a lot of customization and configuration. And maybe that's where this sentiment is coming from. But even if you do, right, I'm sure even Salesforce, who is a highly configurable and customizable product, has a journey that they want to walk their customers through. So I think that there is a path forward here. I think you just need to think more broadly about how you want to approach it. Would be my opinion. Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think you nailed that one. I think you're right. I think that having a vision that is adaptable is important. So, and then you adapt it according to the customer type. So I think you nailed it on that in that regard. Let's go to Carol. Carol's raised her hand. We'll have you talk. What's your question today? She might be on mute.
Yeah, it looks like she is still on mute.
On mute?
There she
Okay,
is.
I think,
Carol.
okay, there you
Welcome. How
go.
are you?
Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Of course,
Okay.
technical issues. I was in mute. Thank you so much for the time. My question is regarding exactly, the journey. So I'm trying right now to start working with different teams on my company to create this journey, right? But it seems like it's a little overwhelming for everybody. They seem like, oh, this is too much work. I'm trying to explain that, that this is important to understand the pain points, because if you don't see it, you cannot find those points where you can actually fix it, right? So why will you recommend to work, in a cross-functional team? Because I'm trying to get even finance involved, because, the pain point about billing and, there's surprises about, oh, I didn't expect this invoice. What's this going on, right? So how deep should be or not be that journey, right? So because I know that when you did your webinar, it was very like a cycle, like circle kind of stuff. Like it was very, very simple, but very good. But at the same time, I was missing okay, but how I identify those pain points? It's not in the journey. It is maybe in another exercise that I have to do.
Yeah, so Carol, I think what you might be describing is more of a RACI model. And that's where you're going to map out who's responsible, accountable, informed, consulted throughout the different various steps in the process. The journey for me, I've always kept that a bit more high level. And I don't think about it the same way that the marketing team thinks about the journey from, making sure that your brand is identified before the customer even knows they have a problem, right? I'm not thinking about it that way. I'm thinking about once a customer becomes a customer, what I want their experience to be and how I intend to work with them throughout that partnership. But to your point, there are very specific stages, tasks, and activities that have a multitude of different people involved and steps and activities that have to be executed that have a sequencing and obviously an impact on the customer. And what I've typically done is I've extrapolated that activity and that motion from the journey, right? I designed the journey to be a little bit more high level as we've just described it, right? And then I create the RACI, but I break the RACI down so that it does feel digestible. I don't try to create a one-off huge, massive document. I kind of break it down so that each either task and activity or couple steps is broken down into one section. So if I was, and I am in the process of working on my RACI for hours, it's going to be by stage. And so it will be broken down by this part of the stage will have these 10 tasks and activities, and it will clearly outline who owns those tasks and activities, right? But I think maybe introducing it to each of these cross-functional teams in a bite-sized way that supports the overarching journey, where maybe you're just painting a picture for them to understand the value and the concept of what it is you're designing, and then breaking it down so it doesn't feel like a heavy lift for them. Sometimes it's hard to get people to be bought into things, even though they understand the importance and the value of it, just because everyone has so much on their plate, right? And so it's more of a, it's not that people don't want to help or get involved. I think it's what their time and availability permits. So I think if you can find an easy way to bring them into it, and perhaps even maybe taking a first stab at it and saying, here's what I think needs to happen, or here's what I believe needs to happen in this order, and here's who owns it. And then look for them to lean in and get involved and maybe making revisions or kind of working with you on it. I found that to be really helpful as an approach in my last organization, where nobody wanted to give me any time to work on their AC. So I just said, you know what, I'm just going to go do it. And I worked with them all. And I said, okay, here's all the things that I've mapped to your organization. Let's go through them. Let's go and see, like, does this make sense? Does this feel right? Should I make any changes? And everyone got involved when the work was, not necessarily their burden.
Yeah, already. Yeah.
And because I did lead the whole entire post-sales organization, I did feel like that was my responsibility to own that project. And
Correct.
Taking that approach actually got everyone more excited, and I got the information I needed, which was more important than the actual execution of it myself.
Okay, thank you so much.
Dave, wait, I'm sure Dave has a thought there.
I just have one thought. I mean, the main thing I was focusing on is trying to identify the challenges and issues that customers have in their customer experience, and building the experience, the customer journey to improve or prevent those. One quick suggestion there is that there are two ways to surface insights better around the customer pain points. One is to leverage data. So anytime you can use data, if you just say as a customer success team, customers are experiencing these 3 or 4 things, you won't have the impact as if you bring data to the table. So bring data to show the challenges. And then also, in addition to that, bring the customer's voice to the table. So if you are constantly trying to solve problems that you feel like your leadership team is not hearing, then put them on the phone with customers, or create a customer immersion program. And so they will feel the pain points themselves and have that empathy. And then when you go into the customer journey exercise, now you're having a much better and much more thoughtful and directed conversation, because everybody has a glimpse of the both positive and negative aspects of the current customer journey. I'll just add that.
Yeah, no, amazing. Definitely data is the way to go. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Carol. All right, let's go back to the Q&A. We are going to ask a question from Kaliko. So Kaliko is asking about tracking successes. So Kaliko's, I hope I'm saying your name right, sounds like he is a customer of ours, and asking about a new feature called Pulse Success Factors. So Kristi, just taking a step back, in customer success, we tend to always focus on identifying the risks within our customer accounts and really focus on risk management. Why should we focus on identifying our most successful customers and the attributes of our most successful customers? Maybe let's dive into that to answer this question.
That is a great question, and something that I know that a lot of teams aren't spending a ton or enough time around. But the reality of it is that if you're identifying what drives good behavior and good outcomes in successful customers, that is ultimately what you want to emulate, right? So I think you learn a ton about what your good, strong customers are doing, and you can create those repeatable experiences for other customers, right? If you know one customer is using the platform a certain way and having tremendous success driving a particular outcome, and you know another customer has a similar goal and objective, well, great, you can help that customer by using what you've learned from another customer who's also been successful. So I see the success factors as a way for us to highlight and uncover what we ultimately need to be driving all of our customers towards, right? Like if we know strong use cases, strong adoption, strong affinity for certain workflows, great, I want to go and emulate that. So for me, the success factors are all about learning what we should do and then working to help us do that at scale.
Right, perfect. Okay, next question from Monica. She's, how do you share the value of the customer success brings to the table if they're not responsible for upsells or renewals? What data points are important? Dave,
you're our data guy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you're not responsible for upsells and renewals, I think there's a lot of other aspects that you can. I mean, obviously, even if you're not driving the upsells and renewals, you have significant influence. So I wouldn't discount that because you are significantly responsible, whether or not you actually perform the upsell activity or renewal activity. So continue to show your retention numbers, the reduction in churn, and the expansion data. But you can also look at other things. You can look at things like overall customer health. You can look at the amount of customers who are advocates for you. And advocacy takes shape in many different forms, whether it be references, being willing to speak, do a case study, the number of G2 reviews that you have. All of those are generally great ways to show your impact. And then the other one is just your overall influence on improving other parts of the business. So are we helping to improve our the product that shows increase in adoption? Are we able to work better with our customers to achieve their business objectives? All of those other things can be parts of the story that shows your influence across your team. Kristi, anything you want to add?
I mean, I think you nailed a lot of them. I would say advocacy programs are also really helpful. So tracking referenceable customers, tracking customers who are, willing to share their experiences. So I think all of what you walked through, Dave, I think are a lot of the right ones. I think it also depends on what your business is ultimately responsible for, because every organization is a bit different. I've seen teams that own onboarding, don't own onboarding, own training enablement, don't own training enablement. So I would say just think about what your organization owns and is responsible for. And then think about the metrics that you as a leader are tracking and holding your individuals accountable for, and then make those some celebrated metrics, because obviously your team exists for a reason, to drive some business impact and value. Just socialize some of those metrics with the team, the broader team, and help celebrate that.
Okay, great. All right, let me try to ask this. This is a long question. This is from Laurence Henderson, I believe. My organization is a SaaS DAM solution. We have traditionally been a support org, that each support person does it all: pre-sales support, onboarding, ongoing support, and renewals. We are looking to break that up into, for obvious reason. One of the issues we've encountered is how to manage multilingual support. We are a global org, and we support customers in 8 languages. Supporting customers in all those languages becomes a challenge when we split an org into pre-sales, onboarding, CS, etc. Any experience or advice? So global customer base, typically supporting the entire journey, it sounds like. Now they want to kind of break it up into different stages of the journey, but do so in an efficient and effective way. Any thoughts there, Kristi? That's a tough one.
That's a tough one without bringing on additional members of the org, because I don't know, maybe it's still too early for me in my day, but I can't think of, this is like a puzzle I can't really solve, because unless you've got individuals across the business that speak multiple languages, I don't see a solve here, right? If you've got somebody who only exclusively speaks English, Spanish, for example, having them serve a market, having them serve France and Germany or APAC isn't going to work. So, I don't have a way to solve for this without bringing on net new people, Dave. Maybe I'm missing something. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're right. I think that there is a challenge from my experience managing global teams. It's really important in several regions of the world to have local support with who understand the local the culture, the language, and how business is done. And so in some of those times, scaling is a little bit difficult in that regard, in that you might want to optimize longer for local to optimize for the local customer experience, rather than efficiencies within your business, if that makes sense. Philip's questioning, what is the problem you're trying to solve to split? And that's kind of what I would say is the efficiencies you're trying to gain by splitting up into different functional areas are more important than delivering a local customer experience, a positive local customer experience, and weigh those two out and determine what's the right answer. That's what I would say. Okay. hopefully that's helpful. Okay, any other questions? We've got more time. If anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question or drop a question in chat or Q&A, we're open to more questions or comments or whatever you like. Okay, we've got Carol. We've got Carol back. Carol.
Hello, yes.
Welcome back.
Again, thank you. So my question now is regarding renewal. So we do have an auto clause that is out to renew. So I saw your webinar and explained like, we definitely need to tell the client, hey, this is going to happen, right? And how will you advise where, management doesn't want you or customer success to actually touch the clients, like don't say anything, how you manage that and how you express to the management team, hey, it is important to actually raise this. And because as you say, like keeping bad clients is not good. And you want to, if there are some issues, you want to have that time to actually solve them, right? So, but I think I haven't done a good job to express this. So what will be your recommendation, to address this and show the management that it is important, and it is like, if it's a client is going to leave, it is good,
Oh, Carol, I worked at a company many years ago. Don't try to go back, map it into my LinkedIn, but their policy was very much that. It was talk to your customers 29 days from the renewal, not 31 days from the renewal, because just let it auto renew. And I had a tough time with that. I'll tell you very transparently, it was a horrible experience for me and my team. It was a horrible experience for our customers. It kicked the can, right? These customers inevitably went and left anyway. And when they did so, they, tarnished our brand in their communities. We're very vocal in public about our tactic, as they would refer to it as, of trapping them into an auto renew. So I think that's the sentiment you need to express to your leadership team, is really, it's not good business practice. I can understand the short-term gain there, but it's a huge long-term loss. You want to create an organization where you're delivering value for your customers and delivering on a very positive experience. And you can even, hopefully paint a picture for them where that might be a bad and poor experience for them, right? If they were not getting value out of something, and just because they failed to recognize the date or things were not communicated effectively, that they are now effectively trapped into something that they didn't want to be in. I'll tell you, like with customers where we are very transparent about the auto renew, listen, sometimes it works for us, sometimes it doesn't. Yes, there's probably some customers who, as a result of that, give the notice and they let us know that they're leaving. But those customers, and if we handle it well, have a higher likelihood of coming back one day. And I think that sending them off and having a good experience on the way out is as important as creating a good experience on the way in. If you trap a customer into an auto renew and enforce that auto renew, I have a very strong opinion that they likely will never come back as a repeat customer, and they will probably encourage others not to as well. So I think, you have to just kind of paint that picture as a company, but I think it's really poor practice. And I'm sure that the team supporting that direction isn't really thriving either. Dave, I'll let you jump in there.
No, I agree. I think
very sad. So
yeah, yes. No, I think that's hard. I think having bad fit customers is such a difficult thing, because I think initially it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like the high before the major low, if that makes sense. We celebrate a new customer coming on, but when they're a bad fit customer, it only brings difficult situations down in the future. It has difficult conversations. The customers are not happy. You're not happy. They sometimes influence your roadmap in a way that's not healthy for the business, because they may be angry and may force their hand to do certain aspects on the product or certain feature requests that aren't in line. And so I think it's really important that when you have a bad fit customer, you call a spade, you do your best to take care of them, but don't do it at their expense or the company's expense. And then the last thing I would do is make sure that you're always providing feedback back into the sales team about what were the attributes, why were they a bad fit customer, and try to continue to refine your ideal customer profile so that going forward, they can do a better job of closing good fit customers. So,
that's a great feedback. Thank you.
thanks, Carol. Appreciate the question. I've got a few more questions here. Somebody's building a support and success team at their new company, and came from the support side, and but is building the onboarding and customer success, and fairly new. Leaning into the success side, is building an onboarding journey the best place to start? So new lead, sounds like new leader, more experience on the support side, but taking over the success side. Where's a good place to start as far as this leader is? Is it building out the onboarding journey, Kristi?
You know, the beginning is always a good place to start. I would say you're probably not wrong to start with your onboarding, because you're going to bring customers into the organization that you're going to need to have a plan of what you're going to do. And how you're going to get them set up effectively. So I would say absolutely, if you're not ready to go and do some higher level initiatives and start tackling those, I would definitely say start with the onboarding, right? Because they're your customers coming into the organization, make it a good, positive experience. Make sure that you're doing a good job helping understand what their goals and objectives are in the partnership, tracking that, and then making sure that you're getting the platform configured and the end users trained and enabled effectively. So I'd absolutely say onboarding is a good, safe place to start. Once you've got that though, you're going to need to figure out, well, what happens after onboarding? So don't focus on onboarding and forget that there is going to be an after onboarding. So just make sure that you've got a plan to go figure out what the next part of that journey will need to look like for those customers, and don't leave them disengaged and unsupported. I think that would be a really poor way to exit a really strong onboarding. I've heard from a lot of folks, just, in my time, right? They've had really good onboarding experiences only for them to end and feel like the customer didn't even know what was happening, right? There was no formal closure. And then their support and their team kind of fell off the map. They didn't feel like they had anybody once onboarding concluded. So just make sure that that's not the experience that you have for your customers. So start at onboarding, but make sure that you are thinking, well, what happens when we're done?
Excellent. Excellent advice. All right, we've got Kristen asking the question, what trends or changes do you foresee for the CS community in the coming year? What kind of influence would both of you like to personally have on the community in this next year? Go ahead, Kristi.
Yeah, I figured you'd punt that one. Okay. Trends or changes. Listen, I think that you're going to have folks that are more thoughtful about a programmatic approach. And so that doesn't mean customer success at scale, doesn't mean just tech touch. It's how do you use technology to support a very strategic program? So I think there'll be more focus on that, right? How do you do more with not necessarily less, but what you have? And then I would say in terms of what I hope to bring to the community, I think more of this stuff. I loved this boot camp. It was probably the thing if I had to look back at 2021, it was probably one of my favorite projects that I was able to do and be a part of. The excitement from the community, it was there, the conversations, the attendance, the registration. I mean, people want this type of content. So I really would like to just continue to bring this type of thought leadership to the community on an ongoing basis. And hopefully we can answer more questions and solve more problems.
Great. Yeah, I'll just add, I agree. I think that the global customer success community continues to mature in our ability to execute within companies. And from an operational excellence perspective, I think that we continue to have more and more thought leaders out there who are bringing great ideas and insights. And I hope that we see more continued innovation across the community, from frontline CSMs to leaders to thought leaders, whoever it is. Continue to be innovative, to think differently and outside the box, and bring new, fresh ideas to the table. I love that. As far as our contributions, Kristi and I always use this word impact. We love the word impact. We just love having impact on the community. We're both longtime members of the customer success community, some of the earliest members of the community, and there's nothing more that we love to see this community grow and flourish. And we love to do our part in contributing, both as professionals who have been in customer success, but also as a company, ClientSuccess, with our solution and our thought leadership as well. So that's what we hope for the coming years, just more impact. All right, we've got another question. How do you split tracking metrics if you have an on-premise product versus SaaS? Meaning, how do you track both? So you get a company that has one portion that's on-premise and another one with SaaS. The challenge with that is that a SaaS product naturally has the ability to track it because there's digital signals that we can capture. Sometimes on-premise products, we can't capture any of those digital signals. So how do we track both? Kristi, you want to start or you want me to?
Here you go first.
Okay. I think that I would just say that the product usage, which is what I think we're referring to here, usually product usage is tracked is the digital signals, is only one aspect of customer health. It is important, and anytime we can track product usage and adoption, that is a really good signal. But product adoption also, or product usage data can give you false positives and false negatives. I think Kristi shared one in a webinar 1 or 2 times ago, probably on the customer health side, of a false positive that she received on the product usage and adoption side. And so there's a ton of other ways that you can track health outside of product adoption. So just even customer engagement is a really critical one. Is the customer engaging with you? Are you able to have a conversation with that customer to understand how they've adopted the on-premise product? And there's other things. There's the insights that you receive. Kristi talked about Pulse, which is the disposition from the team. There's different ways in which you can do that other than product adoption, and I would just continue to follow those. The other one I would say is NPS. I know there's probably some on here who are saying that NPS should be dead. I disagree. I think that it's any signal you can get from the customer about how they're using the product, what their disposition is a positive signal and a positive area to learn more about their health. And so I would use any and all ways that you can get feedback and health signals from your customer. I don't know, those are a few.
I think those are pretty good. I mean, I think listen, on-premise is tricky, right? You don't have that free flow of data coming on board. So that's why I kind of wanted to hear your answer first. But yeah, I think that what you leaned into there is great. Sentiment, engagement, advocacy, those are all parts of the partnership and elements that you should be paying close attention to. Your ability to develop and foster relationships high and wide, right? The quality and quantity of those relationships. These are all partnership signals, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to focus on their adoption or usage of a certain or particular product. There are so many more elements that you could be looking at. Even in the health score webinar that we did, we talked about, there was 8 different categories and product usage and adoption were 2 of them, but there were still 6 others. So I think leaning into the ones where you can get that visibility and get a sentiment on how the partnership is going is equally as important as to just how they're using the product.
Okay, excellent. We've got time for a few more questions. If there are any out there, drop them in. Okay, let's see. Kristi, maybe I'll add, we've got a question around engagement with sales, collaboration with sales. What are your thoughts on collaborating with the sales team to make sure that there's a positive and productive relationship between customer success and sales?
Well, I love sales. I've learned to love sales. I think, listen, the best thing you can do, especially if you're a CS leader, is to build a strong relationship with your sales leadership team. Understand what's driving their organization, help them understand what's driving yours, and share feedback early, often collaborate in a very productive manner. I think that there's been a lot of this customer success would like to point fingers at sales all the time, right? Like they gave us a customer who is horrible. They misset expectations. They said the product did something it didn't. And I feel like that's just, it's fostered this very negative, perpetuated this negative relationship between these two organizations, when I feel like we're ultimately working towards the same thing, right? Sales is trying to grow net new business. We're trying to grow our existing base and make that, a larger part of the pie as well. So you guys have similar goals. think stop trying to compete with one another and just start to work collaboratively and understand what drives both parts of the business, but share feedback, right? If things aren't working, hopefully you've built a good relationship where you can hopefully communicate that back and forth, and vice versa, right? Maybe your team isn't doing a great job supporting the customers that they worked so hard to bring on board. And so they want to be able to keep those customers happy, satisfied, seeing value, because that helps them bring on either more revenue for them in the future, or at least fosters that advocacy program. So I don't know, my big thing is spend time, learn to love each other, understand where each of you are coming from, and figure out a way to work together.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll just add, I agree. I think at the end of the day, we just need to remember we're all on the same team. We're all all aligned to the same objective, which is taking care of our customers and growing their business and ours. And I think realizing that and working with that collaboratively, understanding roles and responsibilities, but also approaching every day with your collaboration that we're in this together, and keeping the customer front and center is what I would recommend in that regard as well.
Yeah, and I'd say one more thing that I think is just a good rule of thumb with all of us, all moving very fast, very quickly. Try to assume good intentions of everybody.
Yes.
It's not always easy to assume that everyone is trying to do the best thing for the situation, for the customer, but just assume best intentions and don't go in there assuming that somebody was trying to do something sneaky or not right, or something that was going to, drive their agenda and not the collaborative one. Just don't make assumptions. Go in there, ask questions, understand what situations were, and leave there with positivity. I don't know, would be a good point of collaboration that I think everyone should focus on.
Okay, great. One last question we'll take. What do you do? What's the best practice advice when you have a customer that is non-responsive over a long period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I have an infographic that I'm happy to share on this one. There's a ton of things you can do. Obviously, don't wait until your customer has been unresponsive for a very long period of time. Right. I think the best thing you can do is, if there's a specific cadence of engagement, look at other signals. It's not just the engagement, but if somebody's not using your product effectively or the way they've intended, use that as early warning signs to intervene. And hopefully you'll get ahead of things before they've gotten to a state where you can't engage that individual any longer. But if you are there and you're trying to get out of it, obviously I'm big on persistence and finding multiple avenues to reach somebody. So I feel like everyone is very comfortable using email, maybe not as comfortable picking up the phone and calling somebody. So I do believe in just that dead technology of phone calls. Pick it up, call somebody. I've tried messaging folks on LinkedIn. I found that that's driven some engagement and positive responses there. Go to other points of contact, right? If there's folks that are using the platform, go reach out to them in the context that is meaningful to them, not necessarily with the same agenda or objective. Going higher, going wider. I've reached out to folks in finance, right? Somebody is paying this bill. If somebody is writing a check, somebody cares. And so that's often helped me find a creative way to break in. But I would say the big thing there is persistence and lead with value. Don't drive a conversation with your own agenda. It's not about you. It's not going to drive a response. Nobody has time for what you need. Everyone's got limited minutes in the day. So make it something that's valuable and engaging for them. But like I said, I do have an infographic I'm happy to share with everybody on a few more additional tips and tricks that I've found to be very helpful.
Awesome. I'll just add, I love the professional persistence and leading with value and being creative in leading with value. I love SalesLoft CEO Kyle Porter has often said how much he loves when he gets an email from an SDR. He's talking in context of SDR that stops him in his tracks. Because I can tell you, like I was complaining over the weekend, how many emails I get from SDRs just constantly. But every once in a while, somebody will have a creative, thoughtful, valuable message that stops me in my tracks, makes me think and go, yeah, I'm going to reward that person for the effort, the creativity, and the professional, classy persistence, and respond to his email. And I would say CSMs can take that advice as well. We can all take that in being thoughtful and creative.
Yeah. And by the way of creativity, like I have even had people who have like researched or watched my LinkedIn activity. I recommended a book. Somebody was like, hey, I loved that. But they wrote me a personal note and sent me a different book that they were recommending and wrote a note about how they saw I liked a different book and felt like this one would also be great. Of course, anytime somebody sends a gift or goes to that extent, what kind of person wouldn't respond, right? So it's going to generate a response one way or another. So I think to Dave's point, right, that creative element goes a long way. Don't just be another soundbite or email or something that they're too busy to hear.
Yep. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us today. This has been awesome. I've appreciated the questions. Hopefully you found value from this. We'll do it again in the future. What's coming up, Kristi? Remind the group what's coming up next week.
So next Tuesday, we have Bob London, who's joining on how to have strategic conversations with customers. That's going to be
awesome.
a fantastic session. So please, if you've not registered, go ahead and get registered for that. In the coming weeks, we'll have a bye week for SaaStr. So for anyone who is attending SaaStr, let us know. Dave and I and the team would love to meet up with you guys out there. We will be out in California in a couple weeks. So please let us know. Otherwise, we do have the State of CS. We have our annual report, finally got all of the results. Oh my gosh, Dave and I have already gotten a sneak peek. Amazing, amazing data. So please, you'll want to join us for that as well. So lots of really cool things coming up in the coming weeks. And then if you haven't registered, we're coming back to you in October with our second edition of our CS Leadership Bootcamp. Very similar to the one we had, 4 new topics, probably a Q&A session as well, but really great stuff. So hopefully you guys will all register.
All right, great. A lot of good stuff coming. Come back. We'll see you again. If we can ever do anything, just reach out to us. We're grateful you're here and have a great week.
Bye, everyone.